Can I give you my least favorite trades of the last 30 years? And I ranked these based on, and I went through, because I had done a list. I was going to do a whole podcast about this. So I just kind of cherry picked from the list. But I was trying to think like trades I instinctively hated the most. And this is in no particular order. And then I'll end with the one I hated the most. When Toronto finally traded Vince Carter in 2004 for a bunch of crap, and they had to take Alonzo Mourning's contract back and all that stuff. I was like, that trade's terrible. Like you can't feel like you have to trade Vince Carter that badly that you actually not only made your team worse short term, but you didn't even get cap flexibility, good picks, anything. I hated that trade. T-Mac for Steve Francis, Coutinho Mobley, and Kelvin Cato was just an insane trade. Like, can you think of Orlando knowing what we know now in 2022 and T-Mac's on the block? What would that have been? That would have been more than the Gobert trade, right? That would have been like 5 firsts and 2 pick swaps, but everybody was a moron in the mid 2000s. Your guy Barkley, that trade was reprehensible the moment it happened.
To Phoenix?
Yeah, Hornacek, Tim Perry.
I like Tim Perry a little bit.
No, that trade was like, wow, you just traded one of the best 5 guys. You traded one of the best 6 guys in the league. You got nothing back. What are you doing? 2 firsts for Eddie Curry was iconically bad immediately. Remember that?
Yeah, because then they also had to pay Eddie Curry too.
Yeah. And it was and we're paying him $60 million.
And apparently the Eddie Curry thing with the Knicks was, well, nobody wants to do this deal, and we don't want to do the deal until we get this heart test thing done. And Isaiah was like, well, we don't need you to take any heart test.
Right. No, we're fine. We'll look the other way. This is a personal one for me and House, but when Washington traded the 5th pick in the 2009 draft for Randy Foye and Mike Miller, I actually thought House was going to just leave the country. He was so upset. I was upset for him. It was the draft with Curry and Rubio, and it was like a really good draft. And it was just insane where Washington's going, we're so close. These are the last 2 pieces. Mike Miller and Randy Foye, and we're good. Now it's time to compete for a title. That was insane. The second Chris Paul trade, which I guess was the best they could do, but just felt like, man, Eric Gordon, who I really liked, Eric Gordon's got to be awesome because Chris Paul had somehow become undervalued. And then my number one, I hated this trade. It still makes me mad. I can't believe it happened. 1996, Dallas trades Jason Kidd for Sam Cassell, Michael Finley, and AC Green. And it was because he wasn't getting along with Jim Clemens. And they were running the fucking triangle with him. And it still is infuriating to me that they didn't understand what they had with Jason Kidd. And they just made like the classic 3/4 for $1 trade. He was like 22 years old. In all of those cases, I was instantly revulsed by the trade, if that's even a word. And I felt the same way about the Gobert trade.
My first one is the one it was just, I remember being at a nursing home visiting my grandmother, and I was 10, and it was 86. And it was the Moses Malone. The Sixers could have had Moses Malone. Oh, that's a great
one, yeah.
It was, it's funny, those things that you remember so clearly. Like I remember, I don't know that it was a great thing health-wise to be 10 years old and just walking around the nursing home lighting up everybody, but that's what I would do. I would just get up and relight everybody, which I think is probably frowned upon now, being 10 and just sitting in a nursing home and then reading Reader's Digest because you're so fucking bored.
Yeah.
But we were watching the news on a little TV set, and you got to remember, like my first thing was loving those Sixers teams because it was Dr. J and it was Moses. And then this Charles Barkley guy comes along. All right. So, I know this is always weird when everybody hears this and can't understand why I'm from New England, but like that was, when you're impressionable, you're a little kid, that's what I loved most of anything. Fucking love Moses Malone. And I'm like, wait, the Sixers got the first pick with this team and they could have Moses, Brad Daugherty, and Charles Barkley. And it's like, no. Not only are we going to trade Moses Malone for Jeff Ruland and Cliff Robinson, the former Harlem Globetrotter, not Uncle Cliffy, they traded the number 1 pick, the rights to Brad Daugherty, for Roy Hinson, who played 100 games for the Sixers. It's
the most brutal combo trade in the history of the league, I think.
It doesn't get nearly enough credit as one of the worst trades in American sports history. Now, I did talk to somebody who was involved in it later on, and they said, there were some things that we needed to do to kind of shuffle around that you guys didn't know about. I'm like, well, yeah, at 10, I definitely didn't know about any of those things. But
right.
Like, it's kind of like, okay, so that was your only option? Like, think about that. Think about trading.
How about just take Brad Doherty? He was sitting right there. You could just drafted him first.
Yeah, and they were like, he had some back issues. You're like, what was Roy Hinson's? What were his pluses at that point?
Knee stuff. I forgot to mention the Pau Gasol trade, which almost goes without saying, but that trade almost felt like the league was fixed with that.
Well, that was the other one that I always want to point to because it's funny, retroactively, that one feels like it's not as bad because
of what happened with Mark. Yeah.
But what you have to remember is I've never heard of a trade, at least in all my years of talking to teams. Again, it's not like I'm some reporter, but whatever. I've never heard more teams pissed off after a trade in my entire life of talking to people in the league.
It was 3 weeks before the deadline. Nobody knew he was available.
Nobody knew he was available. That's what people were so mad about. And everybody kind of knew. They're like, oh, this is a tough one to figure out. But they go, if you're going to do this shit, take some phone calls.
Right.
Like figure out what the market is. Pretend this isn't already wrapped up to LA.
It's terrible.
And I've never had teams more upset than that one.